our event coming up, Midnight Mass Masquerave on October 28th here in Saratoga Springs. This is our first event under all of us and with UPH. We're very excited. We're really excited to have you as our first guests. I'm super excited just because you're a good friend of mine. So I'm really happy for you to be a part of it, and also really happy that Naz is going to be here with us. I know that she's super excited as well.
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm really glad that you got her on board as well, because she's one of the only other kind of Aussie and Juna artists living here in the States, and yeah, we always have a good time together. So, and she's doing some great stuff lately. So I think I'm glad that all worked out.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, she's really awesome. Her and I've really kind of started communicating, and she's been great. She's super helpful, and she's super excited. So we're really happy to have you both here. I just want to go over a few things, talk about your life and stuff, and let people know that a lot of people have never heard you before from this area. So we'll talk a lot about you so people can get to know you. Okay. So just tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, let people know just a little personal info about yourself.
For sure. So I'm from Australia originally. I grew up in Canberra, the capital city, but I moved away when I was, I think, 22, and it was to the UK to work with Anjuna Beats, the trance label. And I was always planning on coming back after a few months, and I basically never went home. So yeah, I signed my first record when I was 16, and I'm 38 now. So I've been doing this for a while. And then, yeah, basically after moving to the UK, I was in Germany for 6 years. And then after that, I moved to the States. So I've lived in Boston and Seattle, and now I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, where I've been for the last 4 years. And the whole of my 20s, I was basically just like on world tour with Above and Beyond, who brought me along on a lot of these crazy tours that they were doing as the warm-up DJ. And so I was, just getting started in this scene, and they were putting me in front of these crowds all over the world. Sometimes it was like 10, 15,000 people. And some of these gigs, like when I would get up there on the decks and start playing, there was like hardly anyone there. And then by the time I step off, the place is absolutely packed, and there's lasers and smoke machines and nitrous cannons, and and so yeah, I think working with the label obviously has been kind of one of the main things that I've done in life. And the 2 years that I had in London, I was also working as a studio engineer at the Anjuna Beats studios. So I was kind of a fly on the wall in this studio, doing all kinds of things. Like there was one time we were helping Above and Beyond sort of convert their whole repertoire into a live performance format, so that we could like take it to a big show in Beirut, and they could like perform live, playing all the synths and having all the vocalists on the mic and stuff. And so I've always been kind of partly involved with that label and partly doing my own thing. So I also run a label called Positronic with my friend Dion in Australia. And we are basically kind of a stepping stone label for the artists who are going to eventually be on the labels like Enhanced and Anjuna one day. And then I also run a monthly radio show and podcast. It's one of the longest running DJ mix show podcasts in the world. I think it's been since it's been running.
I'm a listener.
Actually, now that I think about it, I think it's going to be 20 years this year that it's been running. So kind of crazy to think about. And it's just a monthly thing, I think, because I'm constantly sort of sourcing new music and finding new artists for it. And it's never felt right to do a weekly show because it's felt like it's going to be too much work. So I've set up this kind of online platform for people who are doing cool stuff to get noticed when they're on the way to prime time. And I think when people send us something where it's like, okay, this sounds like a polished hit and it sounds like it's going to do really, really well, that's when we'll forward these people onto the relevant people who have those kind of networks. And, and then in more recent years, rather than being on tour all the time, like I was, in my like kind of 20s and early 30s, I'll kind of be in the studio mixing and mastering tracks for people, running the label, and doing just online mentorship with artists here in the studio. So I'm helping people with, solve their musical mysteries, which is what I was doing for such a long time myself. And then every now and then I'll just jet off and go and do the touring thing, and sort of still have a little piece of that world of traveling and exploring the world and seeing new cities and meeting new people. And then today I have a new music production course coming out. So I've just done a course for Hyperbits, which is an online music production school. And so I just recently have produced a start to finish kind of production course where I'm making the song and showing people how I do it. And that song is going to come out as an Anjuna release early next year. So we're going to do a remix competition for it. We got
Awesome.
74 entries for the last remix competition like this that I did. So I'm seeing if I can kind of beat that goal. And then the winning remix will get a release on Anjuna as well. So yeah, it's always been, I've always been in this kind of this bridge between worlds. You know, I've never, you know, I've never been quite on that level of above and beyond of like, okay, I'm in charge of these events with thousands of people and, you know, like organizing teams of lighting people and sound people and organizing stages at festivals. That's always felt like more than I want to do, right? But I do feel like I'm in this sweet spot where it's like I get like a little bit of a taste of that life every now and then. But then in between that, I have this really geeky, awesome music production kind of studio world that I'm in. And that's equally as exciting to me. So yeah, everything's in a really good place right now. And like I was saying to you just before we started this, like this year has just been finishing off like a wave of music that I've been working on for like 3 years. So I have been in like this sort of little bit of artistic hibernation. I've still been putting stuff out, you know, putting out remixes, putting out releases and stuff like that. But this is really going to be kind of the next wave. And it really all starts with this party at the end of the month. Like I was saying, it's like, you know, this is going to be the start of me kind of getting back out there. And I don't think I've actually seen you in the real world since before COVID, if I remember correctly. And I think,
the last time was Montreal, I think.
Yeah. And then was that just before the pandemic began? Or yeah, it was. It was my last gig before the pandemic started. Right.
And it was freezing cold.
Yeah. And then the year after everything opened up again, we had all the festivals happening again. Some of them had to be rescheduled because of, you know, new outbreaks of variants and things. And that was a very hit and miss year of touring. I think for everyone, it was a year where the flight prices were skyrocketing because everyone was traveling again. And it was basically a 50-50 as to whether the party was going to have a vibe, because these parties are all like, yay, let's celebrate life. But I think the year after COVID, we never really had like an official, we had no official end date to it. It's just sort of everything just sort of slowly started to get up and running again. And there were definitely a few parties where it was like, okay, like why are we all doing this again? Like what, like how does this work again? Like what
are we standing too close? Are we standing too close? Are we far enough?
Like, yeah, you know, and I think it's really just, it's been kind of like, you know, this year and last year that things have started to really like just kind of feel normal again. And, you know, I think that, you know, the world has changed a lot, but we do have all these parties back. And I think it was last year I went to EDC and it was something like, it was as many as 400,000 people attending over the course of 3 days. And it was like a whole city of festival at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And it was just nice to see that, you know, it's like we can have all of these parties again and we can have these great times again. So yeah, so for me, I've just been kind of fastidiously working in the studio every day. And I think what people don't see is just how much kind of preparation goes into creating the music for these shows, because every time you open up that project, it's like you're practicing the piece for the recital. It's like you're learning your project, you're learning how it works, you're kind of like learning your own story as you write it. And by the time it actually gets played out, it's been tested, it's been stress tested, it's been, you know, sent to the inner circle, it's been mastered possibly multiple times. But what you end up with is this kind of this little, it's almost like a journal entry of your life. It's like this is the music that was happening in my head at this particular point in my life. And by the time you take it on tour, you start to sort of forget the whole process that went into it and you get to just enjoy it like everyone else. So that's very exciting to me.
That's an amazing experience. It's also incredible, like the help that you, I mean, with you being such a big name, you still spend a lot of time to try to help out the little person, you know, that person who's trying to come up and be where you're at. You know, you mentioned the fact that, you know, you may not be on above and beyond's level, but at the same time, you're still a big name, but you're still doing what you can to make sure other people are trying to be a big name. For sure. That's just incredible.
Yeah, you know? I've always believed in paying it forward. You know, I don't have any particular feelings about the music industry. I think if anything, it's just like an incredible sea of people who are all doing different things. And but it's a bit of a challenge to figure out how you kind of navigate your way to the center of it, right? And it's the same in any creative field. It's the same in the world of art, where there are these kind of nodes. kids, right? Where it's and there's so much kind of like knocking on doors and seeing which ones open. And if a particular avenue doesn't work out for you, then you kind of try something else. And so everyone's trying to kind of navigate their way to the center of these things. And we do, and we have these big sort of, whether it's these big institutions like Anjuna Beats or Enhanced or Armada or whatever, label, or maybe it's a festival group like Insomniac who are putting on all these big festivals all over the country, right? And we also have more people really wanting to get into this than ever before, right? We have 60,000 or more tracks coming out a day on Spotify, and they think it's going to be, it might already be more than 100,000 tracks a day coming out on Spotify. So you're never going to run out of good records to listen to, right? So a lot of the people that I'm working with are basically saying like this feels insurmountable, right? They say it feels like, how am I ever gonna find a place in this world, But I think that is really the same as it's always ever been, which is like you kind of put your flag in the sand and you say, this is me, here I am.
Sure.
And then every day you kind of just grow that a little and you find ways to kind of get more in touch with your musical self, and that builds attrition and people start to notice. And yeah, it's a big world out there, but there are more people paying attention to this music than ever before. And so really, I think the scale of the whole thing has just changed dramatically. And yeah, I think when it comes to Above and Beyond, I think I've always seen them like they're a bit like U2, like they're like this kind of touring band who are traveling around constantly on a mission to kind of save the world. They're traveling around the world, making people positively charged with their music, which I think has more of an impact than we sometimes give it credit for. Right. And that's the same mission that I'm on as well. But I think I get to do it a little bit more sort of self-sufficiently. I have complete kind of creative control of what I'm doing. And I have a work-life balance, which I really appreciate too. I think I definitely hit a point at, where I was like, and I think everyone has felt this way who's touring at some point where there's just a few too many travels in a short space of time. And you can start to become like desensitized to the experiences that you're having. There's one tour that we did, it was like 36 cities in the space of 6 weeks. And there are some cities that we went to on that tour, I can't even remember going there. Like everything was so on autopilot at that point that it was but kind of, wake up, like do the show. And of course it was awesome fun, but it was kind of a rinse and repeat. And there wasn't as much time to really just kind of smell the roses and enjoy the places. So nowadays when I play a show, I do like to actually, I use, the gig as a context for whatever adventure it is that I'm going to have there. So it's like, okay, there's a reason to go, and I feel like all of my great travels in life, I've never really had to come up with some great plan of where I'm going to travel, because there's something just pops up and I go, okay, that sounds great. And then, the gig is obviously, it's why I do this and making this music and performing the task of energizing people and making people kind of hopeful about the future. That's my take on it. But it's also about everything that happens around the show. It's like the food that you eat, the people that you meet, that even if it's just like the hotel that you stay in is kind of cool and interesting in some way, like whatever it happens to be, it's the context, right? And so I've been very fortunate that I've been able to travel all over the world. I had some really, really amazing times. And I've been able to meet a lot of interesting people from all different walks of life who have given me like a really kind of unique perspective, right? But yeah, I think I also spent maybe at least 5 years of this journey banging my head against a wall, being like, how do I get to the center of this? Like, how do I figure this out? How do I get my music to sound right? How do I get my mixes to sound right? How do I get people to notice what I'm doing? And so I think part of the journey for me now is also having a vested interest in just, I think, relieving a bit of that pressure for other people, because people can get very, very, swept up in this, but also feel very frustrated or discouraged, even when they're on a really good track, but they just feel like they're not making the progress, at the rate or the speed that they feel like they should be. So that's been kind of my
I can vouch for that. I can vouch for that for sure. And you've helped me out too. So
for sure.
So talking about Above and Beyond and U2 and all that stuff, when you first started listening to electronic music, who were your first inspirations?
So it's funny, I actually,
was it Above and Beyond, or were there other inspirations that you had?
so what, like once I became a true kind of trance fan, which I guess was something like the late 90s, I Above and Beyond, somehow I completely missed the memo on them. So I was a big fan of Paul Van Dyke.
Me too.
Tiesto, I had a track on one of Tiesto's CDs in the early 2000s. I think it was 2002 or 2004 or something like that. And so I was into this world, and I think I had seen the name, but I had never sort of checked out their music, right?
Yeah.
And and I think I it was only after we started communicating and I sort of checked them out more, I was like, oh, like they were the ones who did that remix of Madonna at one point, because that was one of their big breaks. Is Tony used to be marketing manager for Warner Music, and he did the marketing for Madonna's music album. And so that's how they set up that remix, and that was one of their big hits back in the day, right? So they were a bit of a blind spot for me until we started communicating. But before that, I was also big into like 90s Eurodance. And I have seen a little bit of that sound making a resurgence lately in these mainstream records. And I'm kind of enjoying it a little bit. Like, you know what I mean?
I noticed that too, for sure.
But yeah, but then I think my other great love in life is progressive house, which for the uninformed or people who aren't very familiar with this kind of music is very similar to trance music, but it's just a little bit slower and it's a little bit deeper. And so like, there's progressive house and there's progressive trance, and these two styles of music are basically, they sort of sit in between house music and trance music, which are two sort of much more known and popular kind of formats, right? And so in the progressive house world, I was really into like Sasha and Digweed, Hernan Catano, Anthony Papa, Dave Seaman, Danny Howells, and all these people who are coming to Australia on tour, because Australia is a really fun place to go and tour. If you're from somewhere else in the world, it's like, hey, you want to go tour in Australia, like, go to the beach and pet koalas and stuff. Everyone's like, yeah, that sounds great. So we had like the best of the best coming through on tour of the east coast of Australia all the time. So we were very spoiled with like really, really great parties. And so yeah, I was always kind of heading in a progressive house direction, and it was that music that was sort of catching the attention of Anjuna in the first place. And then after that, I suddenly found myself being the progressive house DJ for the trance party. And that's also been and it got to the point where I was like, okay, I've been around this music and a fan of it for so long, like I owe it to myself to do some trance. So I think when people think about like, who is the quintessential, like, 100% trance sounding artist, they definitely wouldn't list me on that list of people. But I love doing a trance record every now and then. But then like when I'm promoting new artists and releasing new artists and things like that, it tends to be progressive house, which to me is the late night driving. It's the Eric Prydz, doing some like awesome concert with late cool lasers and it blends with trance music, it blends with techno music, it blends with house music. So it's sort of this connector genre of music. And I've always had a great time with it. But what I've realized in recent years is that this music has a stimulant effect, and for me, it's like having a double espresso. And I've actually gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't think I can work on this music in the studio late at night anymore, because it's just playing on it gets me into that sort of state. And it messes up my sleep quality. I'm showing my age here, but it messes up my sleep quality. And so I'm doing all of my really pumping energetic music during the day while the sun is shining. And I'm like, okay, once the sun is going down, like, I can do a little bit of processing of some ambient pads in the song or something, or I can work on some down tempo chill music. But it's like, I need to like this,
tone it down.
this has an effect. I think that's really what we're selling here is this. It really is like, it's like a musical energy drink. Sometimes this music, it amps people up. And I do think there's something to be said for that kind of increasing people's vibrations. And there's also some good science to show that when people all get together on a dance floor and dance in time to the same rhythm, that there is a sort of synchronization that happens between everyone's mental state and their mood. And people feel more inclined to open up to one another and connect with one another. And so that's really what we're doing here. And you definitely see it at these big events where everyone's coming, like the weekender events at the Gorge that Above and Beyond put on, where it's like everyone's camping out for 3 days and they're doing yoga during the day. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really wonderful thing. I'm probably more excited about it than ever. but yeah, I think what people don't see is just how much kind of audio geekery goes into it under the hood. So that's been my other kind of main love the last few years.
That's amazing. Is there anybody currently that inspires you right now? Are there any maybe some new up and comer inspirations that you've heard, or anybody other than Above and Beyond that's kind of guiding you right now?
I think one artist who's always inspired me is Madion. He's a French producer who got noticed by really the whole world when he was 16. And I think he had his first album out by the age of something like 18 or 20. And, he was living in France, and he had managers kind of knocking on his door, like asking to work with him and he had this video called Pop Culture, which is a viral YouTube video that he did where he took like a Novation Launchpad, which is just a big grid of 64 buttons, and he assigned all these different samples from his favorite pop songs and made this kind of pop mashup song that he still kind of performs at his concerts to this day. And he teamed up with Porter Robinson, who is another kind of, very prominent kind of electronic artist in the US, who sort of defies genre in some ways. It's kind of mid-tempo, like he was doing happy hardcore stuff for a while as
Right.
virtual self. And they teamed up and they did one collaboration called Shelter, which is one of my favorite records. And they went on tour with that. I think they sold like 100,000 tickets in California alone for that tour.
Wow.
And they have always just been doing things that are cool and unique and different. And I think Madion was an inspiration because I feel like he was like me, and that he was this kind of teenage kid who just wanted to figure out how this all works, right? But then like the rate at which he figured this out and then what he did with that was always really inspiring to me. And what I like about that collaboration that he did with Porter Robinson is they were like, okay, this went really well. We probably don't ever need to do one of these again. Like let's not even try and follow this up. So they were like, that's it, everyone. That's our collab. That's the one,
Amazing.
So I always appreciate it when people, find some cool, angle, finding their way to the center of whatever it is they're working on,
Right.
in a way that is obviously genuine and has a kind of authenticity to it. Not every artist needs to be authentic. Like Seth Godin says, authenticity is overrated. I think it's okay to be telling a story, to even be a work of fiction to some extent with your stage presence.
Sure.
Derek Sivers says professional artist you is not you. There's a distinction there, right?
Right.
We're all creating a universe, telling a story. But I think when I can see that someone just really has, a special kind of bright spark, and they've got something to bring to the table that's uniquely their own, that doesn't need to be dressed up in any way. I think that's what's appealing to me,
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so this is your first time in Saratoga Springs. Like I said, a lot of people are going to hear you for the first time. A lot of people are going to hear electronic music for the first time. What do you want your fans or your new fans to take away from your set or from their experience?
I think if I ever win a new fan especially if it's like someone who's at the show who just came along and they were like, oh, this was really cool, I'm gonna like get more heavily invested in this world of this particular kind of music. That's always exciting to me, right? It's like when people don't really know what to expect. This music is not everyone's kind of it's not squarely in the realms of what everybody likes all the time. We've obviously got the EDM kind of purists, and I think EDM as a genre is significantly bigger than it used to be. It's much more popular now. It's also played everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's played in restaurants and cafes and on TV shows and stuff.
Right.
But when somebody just is not really expecting all that much and they walk away going like, that was really cool, like and then they sort of go and then they sort of investigate it a little bit more, and they discover all these new things. I think that's exciting to me, because that's the way it was for absolutely everyone when this music began, in sort of late 90s, early 2000s, and when it was kind of blowing up in the UK, and before it had kind of come to the States, and it was still kind of a very niche market in the States. Everyone was so excited about it. And, for me, because I've been listening to this music for more than 20 years, I'm excited about it, but I'm not surprised to hear it, if that makes sense. Like I always love to hear new takes and new styles and things like that. But I think the idea of people discovering this music for the first time, that's really exciting to me. And I think also, I love to imagine what this project that I've listened to 1,000 times and that I know all the individual moving parts and I know exactly how the story goes, and it's, to me, it's completely predictable. How is it going to sound to someone, just hearing it for the first time, because they get to hear something that the producer never gets to hear, which is the whole thing, start to finish, without any idea what's going to happen in the song, right?
Right.
So I think that's what's exciting to me. And then for people who aren't really familiar with this kind of music, because my mother asked me the same thing about a month ago. She was like, how would you describe, like, because parents, they're very supportive, but they don't always kind of get exactly what this is all about.
Sure.
And so I said to her, okay, so like I'm doing progressive house, which is basically like, if you think about house music that was born from the kind of loopy, repetitive disco records of the 70s and music for nightclubs and discotheques, that's still carried on to today. And what I'm doing is kind of halfway between that and the trance music that you hear at rave parties where everyone's reaching for the lasers. And along the way, I'm trying to also tell like a little bit more of a kind of melodic story. There's always there's always chords and strings and pads and occasionally vocals. And, there's a musical story being told that I want to have resonate with people, as well as making people dance.
I love that. And that's why we do it, right? That's why we make music. That's why we produce these events, so people can take something away and go in a rabbit hole themselves and find themselves in love with it, right?
For sure.
That's what we're in this for. It's
right.
A lot of people think, oh, well, whatever people think about it, but they don't really realize how much actually work goes into it, so that people can take away love, they can take away happiness, they can take away just a new feeling when you listen to music, right? Every time you hear a new song, you're like, oh wow, and that's groovy. I mean, it catches you, right? And so that's amazing that's how you want people to take away. So that's what we're in this for. So I love it.
Yeah.
So well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think this is the other sacrifice that I think kind of full-time producers make as well, is that I think we do have to sacrifice being consumers of music a little bit. And I love all kinds of music, and I definitely don't make as much time as I should for just listening to records for the sake of listening to them, especially in the dance world, because I sort of have to listen to so many like all the time anyway to do things like the radio show and get ready for the DJ sets and all that. But I think one of the biggest drawbacks for me is that there are a lot of really, really amazing records out there that are really designed to move people, and people get really, really moved by these records. And I think sometimes as the producer, it's hard not to hear them and go like, okay, like there's a vocal hitting between like 1 and 2 kilohertz. And, the hi-hat's hitting at 6 kilohertz, and they're using an ethereal atmospheric string sound in the background to add a sense of space and emotion to what's going on the center stage. And it's like, it's so hard not to hear all the moving parts now. And I tend to focus like more on like what's going on in the song, because, and that's, I think producers are also like, there's a big, sense of how do they do that? Like, how do I do that? And it's never about like, I want to take this from them and be some sort of cheap emulation. But so I think I listen to music for kind of inspiration now. So yeah, I think at some point I realized, there are producers and there are consumers. And sometimes you don't always get to be so much of a consumer of this music if you're so heavily involved in it all the time. So, but I think, when it comes to these shows, I think what makes it all worthwhile for me is showing up and providing the music. That's the flow of it's like I want the music to be coming out of me and giving people this great time, just like it did for me when I first got into this, and like it still does every now and then,
Yeah, for sure. It still hits me like that all the time too. Great. Couple silly questions for you. Okay, we hit all the music and stuff. What's your favorite costume you ever wore? This is a Halloween event, so we got to ask, what's your favorite costume?
Oh my goodness. I have to admit that Australians, we do the Halloween thing, but it was only when I moved to the States that I realized how hard people go with the costumes. So I'm going to be lame and say it was probably some kind of like pumpkin head that I bought at like the Halloween store for like a gig that I played at one point,
Oh my God, I love it.
Although it is Halloween weekend that we're doing this gig, so maybe we should dress up. I don't know.
I know. We could go costume shopping when you get here.
Oh my God.
Okay, another funny, well, not funny question, but interesting question. Favorite food?
So if touring, I think the DJ food of choice is sushi, because you can eat it and have a really great meal, and it's usually like it's a great sort of thing, thing to do before a gig and socialize and stuff. But you can also function, and it's not heavy enough that you're going to want to go and pass out and go to sleep. So I think DJs often avoid eating really, really heavy meals before a show, because then your body's like, okay, now I want to go to sleep, and it's
Right.
I have to go out. But then more recently I've been really getting into baking as well. So I've turned into a bit of a sort of like amateur, like home baker, which has been kind of I just like making things and finding cool recipes and stuff. So yeah, I would say sushi is probably my favorite food to eat when I'm traveling, and especially because you don't get all that much of it here in Arizona. But yeah, and then all Australians have grown up just eating so much yummy Asian food, because we have such a big Southeast Asian population in Australia.
Yeah.
So really anything on the kind of Japanese, Korean spectrum. But I also love the Japanese pancakes, okonomiyaki, which is basically everything that you want fried up into a delicious tasting kind of like almost like a Korean pancake. If people have had those, it's like that. It's just and the word means whatever you like fried up is what it means. So yeah, so I love that kind of thing, and yeah, I have a big sweet tooth too, so I'm trying to temper that a little bit. And the baking obsession isn't helping.
That's not helping.
Yeah.
So when you get here, I'm gonna have you bake us something.
All right, cool. All right. Start thinking about what you want, and I'll find some cool recipes.
Okay. Jimbo, we're really, like I said, we're really excited to have you at Midnight Mass Masquerave as our very first guest DJ. And thank you for joining us today. We're like I said, very excited to have you, and we'll see you soon.
All right, I'm looking forward to it, and excited to see where you live as well after all this time.
Is there real quick, is there anything you want to send out to people who's listening to check out your page? You want any website, anything you want to shoot?
For sure. So anyone who wants to check out the JayTech Music Podcast, it's a monthly roundup of all of the tunes that I've been digging lately, as well as anything that I might be releasing that month myself. Usually in the second hour, we have a guest DJ, and it's usually someone who's just starting to make waves. And we're at almost 200 episodes now monthly, with some hiatuses here and there. And it's available via Apple, podcasts, and then on SoundCloud. So all of that info is available at jaytechmusic.com /podcast, or you can just visit the main site and click on podcast. And yeah, for anyone who's looking to get further into music production, I do want to give a plug for the music production course that it has come out today on Hyperbits. That's HYPER, so Hyperbits. I don't have an Australian accent, so I thought I'd just mention that. They're an online music production school, and the course is a start to finish course. And we are running a remix competition, and the winner will get a release on Anjuna if they take part in the gold or the premium tier of it. So be sure to check that out. And I'm also doing mixing and mastering as well. So if anyone is needing a track mixed and mastered, that is also available on my website. So
he's a man of many talents, ladies and gentlemen, a man of many talents. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jimbo. I appreciate you being here, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for having me on, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jimbo.
Thanks, Shane.
Boom, we did it.
Yay. Yes, and nice to finally catch up. And yeah, it's been bonkers over here, but it's all calming down a bit now, which is nice. Yeah.
Well, I know you've been so big. I'm like, he'll eventually text me back.
No, I promise. I promise I'm not one of those like artistic types who's always.
No. I know you've been busy. It's all good.
Yeah.
Oh, so good to catch up with you, dude.
Likewise.
So good to see you.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll be in touch about, because we still have to figure out the travel in typical DJ fashion. We still have to sort all that out. Because like I said, I've been very heavily in studio mode, so I'm thinking about possibly doing like some kind of just Jimbo vacation on the way over there. Like I could possibly go to like Chicago or something, then fly from there. So I'm going to figure all that out like this week.
Okay.
We'll get sorted. So
totally fine.
Yeah.
Love for you to if you can, love for you to come in Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I can sort that out.
So we can kind of hang out a little bit more and show you around town and stuff.
Yeah. And it's always nice to not have to kind of hit the ground running and go straight to the gig,
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Congrats.
Well, yeah, and congrats on getting married. And yeah, sorry I couldn't make that.
It's
And
okay.
but it'll be
It's all
nice to kind
good.
of celebrate with you guys, after the
Yeah.
fact
Thank you so
when I'm up
much.
there,